everybody. I'm Sherece Chetty. I'm from the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. I am an Environmental Management Inspector, EMI, as Tia mentioned earlier, more commonly known as the Green Scorpions. And I'm responsible specifically for alien and invasive species compliance within the province of KZN. So, Stiana, who you met during the introductory remarks, I am part of his team, and my colleague Pumlani, who isn't here today. It's just us two inspectors on the ground dealing with AIS compliance within the province. So up on my slide, you see the term post-border compliance. All post-border refers to is that we as compliance deal with the species that are already within the country, already within KZN. We do not work at ports of entry, dealing with introduction into the Republic or introduction into the province. So just to note that as well. So, in preparation for today's presentation, I was told by Kay that everybody seated before me today constitutes the informed public. So today I'm not going to be very definition-based or explain anything, break down anything. I'm here today to give you an understanding of what it is that we do as AIS compliance inspectors on the ground. What is a typical day in our line of work? What are the challenges we see in KZN, the non-compliances that we see? And also just to leave you with some points to consider before I depart with you. And yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, so in terms of applicable legislation, what is the legislation that we ensure compliance with? First and foremost, it's the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act and the parts of the legislation that talks to alien and invasive species control. Coming out of NEMBA, we're also responsible with compliance with the Alien and Invasive Species Regulations and the Alien and Invasive Species List. So you can see behind me, this is a snippet taken from the invasive species listing. And as you can see, most of the time when I say responsible for AIS compliance, alien invasives, the thought process goes to everything green, plants and trees. However, that's not the case. We're also responsible with compliance with fauna as well. So as you can see in the list behind me, we're responsible for terrestrial freshwater plant species, invasive birds, mammals, the list is extensive. And I just want to stop at this point and also just highlight to you that I'm sure there are several members of the audience here who has a copy of the regulations or the species listing. And I'm sure that there are some people following today's forum that would want to actually download that. Please make sure you are sitting with the most recent copy of the regulations and of the listings. The most recent amendments done to the listings and the regulations was in 2020. And when these regulations the lists are updated, it's usually when species are removed or there's new species emerging or categories change. Make sure you're well versed with the most recent legislation. Okay, so before I get into the actual content of my presentation, there's just two topics that I want to highlight quickly. And my colleague Asivia from the Permitting Office did allude to this already. But I just want to highlight this as well, especially the categories for some reason that I'll mention at the end of this slide. So when I refer and I ramble on in my presentation about restricted activities, what am I referring to? These are activities that I mentioned the full list in the AIS list, but these activities include, and they're not limited to, the possession, the trading of species, so buying, selling, researching, importing, releasing, those constitute restricted activities. When I speak about categories of invasive species, as Asiva mentioned, 4 categories. Category 1A species, these require complete eradication in our country. So under no circumstances can you import a category 1A, can you be even conducting research with a 1A or selling it in your nursery. Category 1 species are those that require control. So let's say, for example, you as a property owner, you have bugweed or lantana or chromalina on your property. What does control refer to? So this means basically you need continuous efforts in place to manage those species on your property to ensure that they do not spread within your property, that they do not spread to adjacent neighboring properties. Keep it under control. Now, having said that, this does not exempt you if you have superpowers and you can achieve complete eradication of one of these species. By all means, go ahead with that. That is great. However, you do not need to put yourself at that financial strain and the effort that goes into completely clearing and eradicating one beast, because it is quite difficult. Category 2 species, as Asiva mentioned to you, are those species that require a permit to conduct any restricted activities within. And your category 3 species are those that are subject to certain exemptions and prohibitions depending on the restricted activity. So if I can give you an example, say for example, you've purchased your residential home in a suburb in the 1980s, and on your property you had a syringa tree, category 3 species. In terms of the species listing, you are allowed to be in possession of that tree. However, you need to ensure that that tree doesn't have seedlings popping up on your property, popping up on your neighboring properties, because the restricted activity of allowing to multiply or spread is prohibited for that category 3 species. So just be mindful of that. I mentioned to you why I want to stress these categories again, especially 1A and 1B. There's a Facebook group, it's not the one we're streaming from today, it's another invasive species group on Facebook that I saw one of the members, so dearly and so good and kind-hearted of them. I think they took it upon themselves to draft, if I can say, little pamphlets or posts that they could share on Facebook with most common invasive species, the categories and the required action. However, the post that they shared correctly identified the species as a 1B, but they were informing the public that that requires complete eradication. And the post was well received, it was liked and it was being shared, and I just thought to myself, that is false information. So I just want to urge, if anybody in this audience sitting here today is the guru of your organization, you're the go-to person that identifies species, that advises people what to do, or if there's admin members of the administrator or moderators of Facebook groups or pages that identify species, please make sure you're well versed with the regulations, the species listing firstly, the most updated version, and also understanding these categories. Because if you are advising people, please do so correctly. I would hate for somebody from the public to rely on someone that isn't of the department or from the legislation itself to be told that they need to completely eradicate a 1B species, and there they go spending all their salary, all their time when they only need control, and then they hate the department and think that it's ridiculous that we could ever require that to be eradicated. Please make sure and be wary of that as well. Okay, so a typical day in the line of work that we do as AIS compliance inspectors, these are the facilities that we inspect. We check compliance in nurseries, pet stores, zoos, reptile parks, game parks, private farms. Sometimes it's not limited to private farms, but also private residential properties and municipal owned land. So you'll see next to private farm, I have section 73 of LEMA and section 76 of LEMA next to municipal owned land. For time's sake, I'm just going to delve quickly into that. So when we check compliance on private farms or private properties, when I say we check compliance with section 73, what does it mean? Section 73 of the Biodiversity Act requires, it talks to the duty of care that all landowners have as it relates to the control of invasive species on their property. Simply put, you as a landowner, you have a responsibility in terms of the Biodiversity Act to eradicate all 1A species in your property, to control 1B species in your property, and to apply for a permit where necessary should you have a category 2 species. That is your duty as a landowner. You are obliged by the legislation to do that. Failing which, you may land yourself in hot water where us as compliance hand you over to enforcement. You will then be faced with the directive that will be issued to you, which will formally instruct you once again to clear, to eradicate where necessary. And if you do not comply with the instructions of a directive issued, you may face penalties such as a fine, imprisonment, or worst case, depending on the severity of the issue, the size of the property, the infestation, maybe even worst case, both a fine and imprisonment. Note that section 73, duty of care. Section 76 of the Biodiversity Act, when you check compliance with municipalities, what are you checking compliance with? Section 76 of the Biodiversity Act requires that all organs of state with property under their control with alien invasive species on their properties, they need to submit to us as a national department something called a control, monitoring, and eradication plan. So this plan outlines to us as the national department, hey department, this is what we plan on doing to control invasive species on our property in our municipality. And this is usually a 5-year plan because it feeds into the IDPs in most instances of municipalities. And they tell us as the department, for the financial year of 2022-2023, these are the properties, property 1, 2, and 3 that we plan on clearing. We plan on clearing 50% of Buggy, 20% of Lantana, for example. We then go out as the department responsible for compliance and check that they actually are abiding by the control plan and what they said they would do. Again, should a municipality not have a control plan Section 76 of the Biodiversity Act. Same procedure, we then will hand you over to enforcement, you will face a directive being issued to the municipal manager, and if you do not comply with instructions to the local control plan to be in compliance with Section 76, again, you can face penalties of a fine, imprisonment, or both a fine and imprisonment. So essentially, Section 73 and 76 of the member basically holds landowners and municipalities accountable for controlling alien invasive species on their property. Okay, so in terms of these facilities that we inspect on a daily basis, I thought I'd just give you just give you a quick overview of the compliance status that at a very high level summary of these facilities, of these properties. And I know I wish we had more time because I believe when you see what I've said as the general compliance status, there's going to be people in the audience here that say, Sherece, you are insane. That can never be good status. That can never be low. If we had more time, I would really like to explain why I came to the conclusions that I did. But again, for the sake of time, let's get into it. So, for nurseries in KZN and the nurseries that we have inspected, we have generally good compliance status with nurseries in KZN. If we do have issues of non-compliance, it's usually category 2 species being sold out of permit. Those species usually include, for example, beefwood and dragon fruit that Kay mentioned. Not many nursery owners know we need dragon fruit or account for dragon fruit. Category 3 that we usually sell, and I think this may also apply to the landscapers to be wary of, is dwarf or rare tree. It's a category 3 species, it can't be sold in a nursery. It's exempted from possession should it be on the property, for example, but it can't be sold in a nursery. Our pet stores in KZN, we have good compliance here as well. I would say better than nurseries even. And our reptile parks and zoos also good compliance. However, take note of my curly bracket next to those 2 points. Whilst at face value, the facilities we walk in and the counters that we check behind, everything is in good working order in compliance with legislation. However, in KZN, there is certainly a black market that exists where trading of listed invasive species is occurring. And it includes not only category 2 species that require a permit that have been traded in without a permit, it also includes category 3 species that cannot be traded in. And again, if we had more time, I would have delved more into that, but that is something that exists. That is another dynamic in KZN and a challenge that we face as compliance in KZN. Okay, our game farms have been inspected in KZN. For the most part, they are in good compliance. We do have the game farms are very good with compliance. I know some of the zoo land even work with like UKZN with helping them with biological control as well. So we have good compliance status here. Our private farms in KZN, this is the upsetting one. Private farms in KZN, I would say we have poor compliance status here. And when I speak about compliance, I'm talking about the duty of care as farmers, as private farmers treat their properties. And I would say, I will use the Uganda municipality as an example. And I know my colleague Mark from the Uganda municipality and my colleague Ryan from Working for Water, they would attest to the infestation, the level of infestation we see in the Uganda area. And I stand to be corrected, but I would say the majority, if not 80% of our level of category 2 species infestations happen in our private farms, not on municipal land. And when I refer to category 2 infestations, I'm talking about the water suckers, the blue gums, the pine trees, the black bottle. Most of these infestations are on private farms. And now I'll just digress a bit and explain to you how it is that how we actually conduct our inspections as EMIs. So in terms of the National Environmental Management Act, us as EMIs, we reserve the right to go onto properties to inspect properties. So when we go and inspect pet stores and nurseries, it's usually, if I can refer to it as a spot inspection, we pitch on the day, we're there to do our inspection. However, with private farms, because we understand it's private owned land, people probably are living on the property, or farm owners are in another country or another province, we give farmers a call beforehand to arrange for an inspection. At that point, we will be dismissed with all colorful languages. I do not want the department on my property. You are not coming. You cannot conduct an inspection. Now, if we cannot conduct an inspection, I cannot hand the matter over to enforcement because I have not inspected the property. And what we've been advised since that is, should farm owners deny you access to a property, we need to then go to the DPP's office as EMIs and get an inspection warrant for that property. Now, say there's 100 farms in the Ngeni area that is denying access to their farms. And now you have to go to the DPP's office and do that. Now multiply that by all the farm owners in the whole of KZN that is denying access. You can forget us inspecting nurseries, pet stores, dairy farms. I can spend just my entire year trying to deal with private farms in KZN. And that is where we're sitting with a huge problem in KZN, is that farmers, private farm owners, are not abiding by their duty of care in terms of Section 73, and it is a huge problem. Municipal owned land in KZN, when I speak about checking compliance here, I'm talking about Section 76, so having control plans in place. This is also a partially disappointing one. In KZN, I'd say we have low to moderate compliance with our municipality 70 control plans. And my next two slides just highlight some of the municipalities and give you an idea of the status of where they are with their control plans. So the Ilembe District Municipality, which is the standing side in KZN, the local municipalities within the Ilembe District, Sian, who you related to the introduction, he did do a presentation to the municipality, explained to them their legal obligation in terms of Section 76, aided them in explaining how to actually go about drafting a control plan. However, we have yet to receive any submissions from the Ilembe District Municipality. The Unalazi Municipality, who I believe could be the audience today, I didn't see the name in the attendance or the audience attendance. However, we went out to the Unalazi Municipality last year to conduct an inspection. They were in their final year of their control plan, so we went out to check what was actually being done, how much had we achieved from what you said we would achieve. And we met with a gentleman who told us, Department, to be entirely honest with you, whilst we had a control plan in place, I've had zero budget to effect the control plan. And I know lack of budget plays most municipalities, but especially the smaller municipalities as well. However, a lack of budget does not exempt you from complying with the law and your responsibility. So for those municipalities who are sitting in a budget deficit problem, please get in touch with the department. Let us try to find a way of helping you with effecting your responsibilities or pointing you in the right avenues of where you can seek out funding and assistance. The Msuti municipality, which covers the Pietermaritzburg area, we conducted an inspection there. They had no control plan in place. We handed them over to enforcement. This was issued, and they actually complied with the instructions of the compliance notice, and they are in the stage of where they've drafted their draft copy of their control plans, and that needs to still be submitted to us for approval and implementation. So we are doing good in the Pietermaritzburg area. We're working towards compliance. The Renkonyeni municipality, which is in KZN South Coast side, and the eThekwini municipality, which is where we're seated in today. We have good compliance with these two municipalities. They've submitted their control plans. We've gone out, we've inspected, we've verified everything meets the requirements, and they've actually received the go-ahead from the department to implement, so they can now begin that on their sides. The final municipality that I've added here, I've added this just to give you an update on the municipality, but also to highlight or show you a very interesting dynamic that we face in KZN that I think maybe only the Eastern Cape or so could also face. But let me give you some background. The Umzumbe municipality, the department arranged with the representative to go out to site to conduct our inspection. The representative told us, great department, come through, etc. We pitched on site, the team pitched on site, and on the day of the inspection, the team was only able to inspect a small portion of the municipality because the department wasn't aware that majority of the Umzumbe municipality actually constitutes tribal-owned Ingonyama Trust land, ITB land. And because we did not get prior approval from the chief to actually be on the land to conduct an inspection, it rendered the inspection incomplete. The matter couldn't be handed over to enforcement, and we've since been advised that we now need to liaise with COPTA to actually effect the whole compliance process and to bring that about. So in KZN, dealing with the crossroads of municipality-owned land and tribal-owned land, it really puts a span in the works for compliance. And I can tell you that's not just for AIS, it's compliance as a whole in KZN. So that's an interesting one as well, I just wanted to highlight. Okay, so these points to consider that I have up here, I've put together these points based on the discussions that we've had with nursery owners, pet store owners, etc. So I'll just briefly run through that. So my first point, I'll give you an example. We go and we conduct an inspection of a nursery or a pet store. We find a category 2 species without a permit being sold, or a category 3 species that can't be sold, and we tell the pet owner, sir,
you do not have the necessary AIS permit, you need to now apply for that permit to continue with the sale of this species, failing which the matter will be handed over to enforcement, or your category 3 can't be sold. The gentleman or the owner of the facility will tell you, department, I didn't know I needed a permit, or I didn't know this couldn't be sold. I got my stock from the largest wholesale supplier supplying the whole of South Africa, or this supplier that's supplying the whole of KZN or the Western Cape. Please be mindful, just because you may get your stock from a large, reputable wholesaler or a very well-renowned supplier, it does not mean what they are selling is in compliance with the law. And I'll give you 2 examples of this. The first example, prior to the amendment in 2020 of the regulation to species list, there was I think it was the 2016 version of the species list. There was a prohibited list that actually had a list of prohibited species. On that list was a specific fish that was actually being sold by a huge stockist of pets. I'm not sure if it was all pets or just marine, up in Gauteng. And they were in possession of these prohibited species, and the smaller pet stores on the ground were thinking, I'm getting my stock from reputable people. And those prohibited fish found their way into nurseries, and we still see them today in KZN. Because they assume, the small guys on the ground assume, we're buying from the most reputable people, what they're selling has to be above board. Not the case. Another example of that point, we were conducting our routine inspection of nurseries in KZN. We came across a nursery that was selling category 2 species. I think it was some beefwood trees and dragon fruit or something else, and category 3 species of dwarf umbrella tree that cannot be sold with or without a permit. We informed the gentleman he needed to apply for a permit and stop with the sale of the category 3 dwarf umbrella tree, and we provided him the grace period to apply for that permit. We came back to the follow-up inspection. He did not comply with our instructions. He still opted to continue with the sale of those plants without a permit. We handed him over to enforcement. Now this guy, actually, which he was very proud on the day to actually say to us, and he belonged to what I believe is called the Garden Center Association, that is affiliated with SANA, the South African Nurseries Association, who ensure by affiliation with them that they ensure, that the types of plants that are being sold, they can guarantee you that plants that are being sold is all above board. Not the case. Should that guy have proudly posted up his SANA certification on the door, and you, as a member of the public, walked in thinking, you know what, I bet my bottom dollar this guy is selling everything in compliance, let me go and buy from him. You would have found yourself in hot water, because you would have not known that you needed a permit for stuff that he was selling without a permit. Do not assume that because you're buying from a large wholesaler or someone affiliated with a certain certification that everything that's being sold is above board. Be careful of that. Okay, the second point to consider, your species category listing specific to each province. Okay, so just to go back a bit, I think my colleague Asiya from the Permit Office also, I think, alluded to this, but when the regulations are drafted and we actually look at putting species into the listing, there's usually research that's done on these species to actually see what is the threat that these species pose to the environment. Should it be deemed a 1A? Should it be deemed a 1B species? And when we do that, in most instances, all category 1A species will be 1A in South Africa, all plant C will be category 2 species. However, depending on the environment specific to each province, you may find that a species that is listed, that is a great threat to KZN, listed as a 1B, may not be a threat to the Gauteng environment, and therefore not listed at all in Gauteng. Often we find in nurseries, a nursery owner will be selling something that is a 1B species in KZN or a category 2 species in KZN requiring a permit. And they'll tell us, department, I didn't know I needed a permit to apply for this, or that I wasn't allowed to sell it as a 1B species. I got my stuff from Gauteng. That listing or that specific species may not be anything listed in Gauteng, and therefore that nursery owner owes you nothing to inform you of the regulations in your own province, but you end up in hot water. Please, if you are stocking pets and plants, make sure that the province, when you're doing cross-border purchasing, ensure that you look at your species-specific categorization of that species. Don't find yourself buying a species from a province that is allowed to sell it into your province, into KZN where it's a 1B. Or if you need a permit, apply for one. The final point that I just want you to guys also consider before I leave. I'll give you another example here. We walk into a nursery, we note 20 pine trees being sold, category 2 pine trees being sold. We ask the nursery owner, sir, can you please provide us with a permit that enables you to be in possession of these pine trees and allows you to sell these pine trees? And the gentleman turns around and tells you, no, I don't have a permit, but I did my homework before I bought these trees. I know they require a permit. So I went to a reputable nursery and a wholesaler, and the gentleman that sold it to me had a permit, and he showed me, and that's why I was satisfied with buying the trees from him. Please note, buying a category 2 species from a permit holder does not exempt you from applying for a permit. The moment you buy that species from the person with a permit, and you're now selling it in your nursery and trading with it, you are now carrying out your own restricted activities, and you need to apply for a permit for those activities. Okay, my last slide is just something I wanted to highlight to you, known as our Environmental Crimes Hotline. I'm not sure if everybody here is familiar with it. Actually, any complaint environmentally related can be laid to this hotline. It's not only alien invasive species. However, for the sake of today and my line of work, should you guys see any illegal transgressions happening as it relates to invasive species, should you be aware of trading happening on the black market, please do lay a complaint via our hotline. And important to note about this hotline, whistleblowers remain completely anonymous. You'll see under my bullet points, this is the information you need to provide when you are laying your complaint. The first one requests your name. That is solely for administrative purposes. So the officer who receives your complaint will then disseminate that to me, and so I know, Sherece, you need to get in touch with person A, B, and C, and we'll have a discussion. That's the only reason your name is required. When I go to site, I don't disclose where the complaint came from or the complainant. Provide the address or the coordinates of where the transgression is taking place. If you believe it's happening, give a physical location and also a description of the matter. So you'll give the address and say, I believe that a category 2 species is being traded without a permit, or a category 3 species that can't be sold is being traded, or whatever it may be. Please lay a complaint. Either do it telephonically or via email as well. And over here, I just wanted to highlight, often when we go out to site, we'll go to pet stores or nurseries, wherever the case may be. And the owner will tell us, I'm sick of you guys. You're walking in here every 3rd month, 4th month, you targeting my pet store. I know for a fact my friend owns a pet store in X, Y, and Z, and you've never visited him, not once. I'll take you back a bit to the first slide of my presentation. If you know how vast KZN the size is, there's 2 of us on the ground responsible for compliance. We literally have our one bucky that we have to jump in and drive through KZN ensuring compliance. I can guarantee you there could be one nursery in an outlying city that we missed, or a pet store in a town that we may not even have heard of. Please, you be our eyes and ears on the ground. Should you believe that there's nurseries or pet stores that could be doing some dodgy activity, selling some stuff they're not allowed to, lay a complaint. It will come to us, we will go and check it out. And yeah, that is it from me. I hope it's been informative, and if there's any questions, I think we... Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It speaks for itself in terms of its explanation. Do we have any questions for Sherece with regards to compliance with the lady in front?
Thank you. Hi, Sherece. Shabana from Selby. On your list of facilities, I missed, or it wasn't there, private homes, not private farms. Can you be checking those up? We are especially having challenges with complaints to Category 1As and refusal of permissions for us to clear. How do you go about addressing the issue for private homes, and especially to compliance with Category 1A species?
Okay, thanks, Ruti. So like I mentioned, it's been both private farms, and sometimes that maybe that's also to private residential properties. In most instances, when we are inspecting a private residence, it usually is in the form of a reactive inspection, so we respond to a complaint. We honestly, in all honesty, we do not just go door to door knocking on people's house saying, hey, we have to conduct an inspection. It is difficult to do. So in most instances, like we did have a complaint with the Category 1A yellow flag up in Hilton that we responded to as a complaint. So because it was a complaint, that's when we went out to the property and informed the owner, hey, we need to come through because you're responding to a complaint. But otherwise, as a routine inspection, just pitching at people's properties and going and conducting, we haven't done that. It's more the private farms that we target at that level.
I think it's a capacity issue as well as well. Question from the gentleman.
Hi, it's Paolo Candotti from the Food Constituency. I just want to try and get your understanding of what you mean by control. For example, on 1Bs, for example, if I have a property, it might be next door to a protected area. I have my favorite tree, which is a camphor tree there, which lasts many decades. It produces over 100,000 seeds every season. It's visited by birds and monkeys on a regular basis. How do you define control in that context?
100%. I know. The word control or the aspect control is very tricky. Whilst it's very easy to define eradication, control is not that tricky. It's more tricky. So basically how we deal with control is, okay, let's give an example. Today somebody complains about their neighbor having an infestation of bugweed that is growing and blocking their entrance to their property, residential scale. When we say control, the next time you come out and inspect that property, I need to see that that bugweed is not spreading and not causing a nuisance or not spreading into that neighboring property. Keep it under wraps on what is your property. However, that clearance effort that may have been adequate for a small residential property is not adequate for a farm, obviously with 200 hectares of land under its control. But we cannot account for control in terms of what happens naturally, whether birds are dispersing that seed or root dispersal. And it is very tricky, but how we look at it is, on your property, should we come and this portion, the next time we come, you're not going to see that spread out of that. That is control for us. But we cannot account for the seed dispersal that happens, that can be carried downstream, for example, etc. But it is very tricky to define control. It is.
Is it a follow-up from Paul? Hi. You're raising the question, I'm checking. Is it a follow-up?
No, sorry, it just goes back to the issue that as a conservancy, we actually recommend eradication. So if you're in a small property, we actually say take it out, because that's the only way we believe that you can control it. We don't believe that there's any other way of really controlling. So we do advocate, and I'm one of those people that advocates eradication, particularly in small properties, and we're adamant about that, because what you're suggesting will not work, unfortunately.
Yeah. I agree. No, I do.
My name is Linda Mlojwa from IAPC. My question is simple. What is the duration in terms of the directive? You issued a directive. How long does it take? How long do you give that person? How much time before you can respond, and then you can do the follow-up?
Yeah. Okay, thank you for your question. So just to clarify our processes, it's permitting, we check compliance with the permitting, failure to comply is enforcement. So the next gentleman that's going to be presenting is Bernard, and he's in charge of enforcement. So he's the guy who issues those directives, so you'll be able to ask him what's the time frames specified in his directives when he presents.
Okay, so we'll get to those questions on the next one.
Question over here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm from Lani from Double Landscaping. I'm from Mlalazi, a shop. So I have a question here. You were talking about the private homes and private farm. My question is, before you do your inspection, did you provide any training or knowledge to the community in general before you inspect? Because for me, I think if I'm like an ordinary person in a rural area, I have no idea what is invasive, what is I need to keep, what I need to eradicate. So did you provide that knowledge first before you do your inspection? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. So basically, in addition to the departments you see here, or units, compliance, enforcement, permitting office, we also have a unit called that deals with advocacy and awareness. So this unit basically goes out to sites. This is the people on the ground with the pamphlets, with the posters, the banners, etc. And they run campaigns where they go out and they target specific areas, whether it's industries, whether it's rural communities, schools, and they run these campaigns, making them aware of the legislation that exists. The legislation that we ensure compliance with, that Bernard ensures from an enforcement perspective compliance with. So that usually does happen. But in all instances, especially with like private farm owners and landowners, and Stian, he's not chair right now, but he always uses this line. As a landowner, okay, should you buy a car today? You know full well as a car owner, you need to fill petrol in that car. You need to be aware of the regulations that exist with driving your car on that road. So when it comes to private landowners, sometimes you cannot play the oblivious card. You are supposed to make sure you keep abreast with regulations that affect you as a landowner. So in certain instances, you can't say, well, the department didn't come out to me, I don't know anything about it. There's certain instances where you can use your judgment subjectively to say, you know what, that Gogo in that farm, obviously she did not know about the listing, but the gentleman who recently bought a property in a suburban area surely knows more than she does. So we do also filter that when we deal with compliance as well.
And compliance is there for the purpose of informing people and the property owners that there is a problem. Is that not right? That is part of compliance. So, last question on this.
Yes, thank you.
For comment.
Again, Mike Butler, Tanzania Conservancy. I concur with the gentleman who brought about the camphor trees. Those are visited by black-bellied starlings, lories, any fruit-eating bird. They disperse them far and wide, much like the syringa tree. And I cannot see that one can say it's a category 3 and right there next door, the moment it moves into a riparian zone, it's now category 1B effectively. So again, I find it difficult that you can classify it, particularly in places like Mpumalanga, KZN. I can understand for Gauteng, where you don't have the spread, they're not as prolific. That's the one question. The other question, you mentioned municipalities and so on. Some of the worst compliance people are the provincial roads. A lot of the yellow flowers that people are talking about, you drive down the road, you see them. Some of them even encroaching into the road. So what is being done about that? Thank you.
Okay, firstly, Mike, regarding your first comment about, okay, another thing that I like to tell people in regard to siting, and they fight with us about the regulations and tell us, this is ridiculous, this shouldn't be a 1A, this should be a 1B. I like to remind people that I wish I was high up enough to make the call on what goes in the species list, but unfortunately I'm the little peasant at the bottom ensuring compliance with what was given to me. I sometimes agree, I sometimes concur with you with certain species, I sometimes have to really, clench my fist when I have to tell someone, okay, yeah, you can keep that tree. I do agree with that, and I do wish that the members of the public and us as compliance and people on the ground actually can have a bit of more of a say in platforms where the legislation is being drafted and the species are put into the list, because I've noted that myself as well. And regarding your second one about the provincial roads, etc., again, if you see we're responsible for the whole of KZN, should you see any roads that are of concern, please do lay a complaint. We will attend to it. I know
You're
there's
going
some
to camp on the
properties.
south coast, Sherece.
Yeah, probably. I know, and we have a Transnet as well. There's certain Transnet and ESCOM roads as well. So
Transnet is here. Put your hand up.
Yeah.
Transnet.
Yeah. Transnet in Pietermaritzburg in the Subantu area. Yeah, problem.
Last comment or question, please.
Well, seeing that we have Futi and Sherece, but Stian has escaped the net, I would like to propose a serious consideration here. I think we need to be looking very carefully at the wording around 1B. And I really believe that the issue has been highlighted now by 2 or 3 people with regards to the fact that control is a figment of everyone's imagination. It's just too subjective. And so my appeal here is to the parties. I know you guys are all not where you should be. But the reality of it is, I have absolute admiration, because I also know there's only 2 of you. My appeal, and it's actually through K as well, is that the regulations regarding 1B really need to be relooked at. The wording around it needs to be relooked at. Yeah, don't pull out face K. The reality of it is that if we don't get extermination into there, or what was that other word you once taught us? Extirpation. Evil. If we don't get those sort of words into 1B, we're not going to win this. I know last time I looked at KZN, it was 67% of this province is under aliens, or something like ridiculous like that. And we have to get on top of the 1Bs. The 1Bs are the problem.
And so my appeal to all of you people out there, please relook at 1B. And then my other question, every single municipality is going to tell you they don't have budget. I mean, I'm from a Mzumbi's neighbor, and we don't have budget. And there's no ways that the politicians are going to give us budget. So what is, you said, call you. Just quickly, can you tell us what it is you think you can do to get budget?
Thanks, Adrian. I wish Stian was here because this is usually where he steps in. But I believe at Stian's level, and at that level, if he engages with municipalities and the management level, I believe there are sources of funding that I don't want to be held, take my word for it, but I think the National Department can render assistance to those municipalities in need at some point or another, or even if it's motivating for their control plans to be a part of their IDPs incorporated from that aspect to draw in more funding. Because I knew, it's sadly, environmental issues are usually left on the back burner. It's the least priority. Budget goes there last, and that's often the issue as well. But I think at a management level, Stian and the forces above him can have that discussion at a management level where we can draw funding as well. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if Working for Water can also get involved, but when Ryan comes up, you can also probably engage with him and see if that is an option for municipalities as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Just on that point, you've kind of missed the bus because the budget has been allocated until March 2023. So if you're looking for more budget, you're going to have to wait until the new budget funding cycle, which is 1st of April next year. So sorry, you missed the bus on the budget. So you're going to have to wait a year. But with regards to the new species and the new species, you want risk assessments done and etc. You missed the bus on that one as well, because we've got the list already for this financial year. But my suggestion is there is a process that you can follow on the species that you want risk assessments done. So please, but first, this is not a wish list. This is not we want all the species risk assessed, because there's a process that needs to be followed. There's funding involved, etc., etc. But my suggestion is compile your list of species you want risk assessments done and send it through to my office, please, so that we can engage with SANB for the risk assessments. Thank you.
And a final advert here. Now that all the organisations in the horticulture industry have been trashed, Morne Volhammer is the president of the Garden Centre Association, of the South African Nursery Association. And we have in front of us Marcus Govender, who's the Standard Marcus, who's the KwaZulu-Natal South African Landscaping Institute chairman. We have Kate at the back there, who in actual fact is the administrator for the KwaZulu-Natal. We are all your partners. So in actual fact, if you have a badly behaved nursery, you don't have to be the only person to go to that badly behaved nursery. We can phone our colleagues. In our organizations, it says by law, you have to obey the law. And we can throw people out, we can send them really bad letters, we can really make their life quite difficult as well. So this is called an organizational operation. So thank you very much from the horticultural industry.
There we go, now you have it. There we go, you're on the hot spot. Sherry, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, and I think everybody is really well informed with regards to what's happening on compliance.